Yes, this evening is the Foreign Secretary, Mr. Ravinath Arisinghe. Very good evening to you, Ravi.
Good evening, Faraz. Good to be with you.
Well, thank you, and welcome to Newsline Live. Welcome to News First. I want to ask you straight up front. Perhaps the largest single contributor to the economy is our expatriate workers, and in 2017 they sent near record $7.9 billion, and quite easily the biggest contributor to the economy. If you looked at the trade balance also in 2017, they contributed just that, was 96%. Now, why is there, or is there any sort of priority given to those of our migrant workers, our fellow citizens, the opportunity to return to Sri Lanka? Is there any preference given to them? If not, why not?
Well, when this whole thing started, when the airport shut down, and we then started gradually opening up, we were also trying to figure out whom we bring first.
Right.
And in that, we set up a web portal, Contact Sri Lanka, which provided us some feedback of who wanted to come.
Right.
On that basis, we have been updating figures commencing from the 27th of March.
Yeah.
And we just have the latest, which comes out every Wednesday. Mm-hmm. And now today there are 40,900 who want to return to Sri Lanka.
40,900. That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people. So at the time we were making this decision in the end of April, we had about 17, and we had about 6,000 children.
Right.
Now we went on the basis that on vulnerability, and at that point we felt that the students in South Asia were the most vulnerable. And the reason for this was it was manifest in Punjab University, where people who lived in a dorm very close to our students got affected.
Right.
And as a result, our priority first was to bring our students out of South Asia. And I think today, when you look at Nepal, the numbers, Bangladesh, the numbers, India in some out-of-the-way regions, mm-hmm. I think that judgment was right, because we would have lost control if we didn't.
Now, on Newsline, we encourage you to send us questions by SMS only, please, 0772 300 305. And thank you for some of the questions that have already started to arrive. One such question here, Foreign Secretary, is that they want to know why the priority is given to students who would anyway spend money from our country rather than the other way around, sending it back. And in any event, according to this message, 80% of those students don't ever come back to serve the country anyway, because they take up employment there. Whereas the expatriate workers, they send their money back. They're important, a very significant contributor to foreign exchange incoming to Sri Lanka. So the question again is, why not give them priority?
Sorry, I was moving on to that. I think the priority, as I said, was determined in terms of vulnerability.
Right.
And that's why we started with South Asian students. Mm-hmm. Parallel with that, our intention and idea has always been that we reach to whatever category, the other categories being migrant workers.
Yeah.
There is also a category of people who are on short-term visas, who are suddenly have gone and stuck.
Yeah.
So these categories were taken on board. When it came, once we finished with these students, there were some movements of students out of London and Australia as well. Then we introduced through a cabinet paper the need that we must go for the foreign employment category, and there again there were some pockets which we had compulsions.
Right.
For instance, Kuwait, which we have brought 466 last week. There was an amnesty declared in Kuwait.
Right.
And if we didn't use that period of amnesty,
Yeah.
those people get to go scot-free. They don't have to pay penalties.
Right.
The Kuwaitis bring them, and most importantly, they can go back.
Right.
Then we brought people from the UAE,
Right.
where there was again pressure because of the numbers there.
Right.
We are going to bring people from Qatar. We have already brought people from the Maldives, which in my view, with almost 7,000 Sri Lankans wanting to come back, out of 20,000 Sri Lankans out there, the most problematic, particularly in Malé City, which shows about 2,000
Yes,
people.
because there is a particular problem there, isn't it? Because
Yes, the density.
The density and the lack of medical facilities on a large scale.
Yes.
Should, God forbid, there is an outbreak there.
Absolutely.
And so the risks, if you were an actuary in an insurance company, you'd be adding a hefty premium to that on a risk-wise.
Absolutely.
I'd like to move on a little bit because you are, after all, the Foreign Secretary, and let's take this question. Please ask Foreign Secretary whether he concurs with the President of Sri Lanka on the latter statement made at on Heroes Day to withdraw Sri Lanka from all international organizations, maybe from the United Nations even, if such bodies interfere or harass our forces.
I think there was a very important phrase also which preceded that. The point was, if people continue to make baseless allegations.
That's right.
I think that is the key. I think the whole post-2009 has been narratives by parties, some who did not want to see us defeat the LTTE, others who have found luxury and comfort, what I might call, maybe they don't have blood on their hands, but they have become political and entrepreneurs in the diaspora who have found, and this is true with other diaspora community groups as well.
Indeed.
That this can be perpetuated, used, massaged, and when you look at the people who are the chief actors in most of these events, all of them have been part of the propagation of this idea that
Indeed.
there was this. And
I get your point, Foreign Secretary. But however, isn't it better? Do you think it's shouldn't it be better to maintain our sovereignty and our line and stay in there and fight for our cause, no matter how small we may be?
I think the point is that is what we are doing.
Yeah.
And if you go back to March this year, 3 months ago, we did get out of co-sponsorship of the Resolution 30/1, and I know a little about it because I served in Geneva
indeed.
right through that period, and was one who, at the point it was...
So how easy is it for us to get out of this joint sponsorship of the...
Well, now we are no longer co-sponsors.
Right.
And the whole point of withdrawing from co-sponsorship, and Foreign Minister Dinesh Gunawardena made that very clear when he addressed, was that we will not co-sponsor, but we will be doing things which we should be doing for the benefit of our people. But co-sponsorship subserving the agendas and interests of those who were not genuinely concerned, because by far the resolution was in some sense a shell.
Indeed.
And with the resolution, whether Sri Lanka benefited or it created more divisions and factions is a matter which I think history will judge. But you could continue with trying to address issues which are there without co-sponsorship of the resolution, and that's what we are doing. But the continuation of baseless allegations is a very genuine problem, as we have seen in the context of the appointment of the army commander,
Indeed.
And the continuation of it.
And that's the point I want to make. Sri Lanka now has a president who was the defense secretary during the war years, and especially towards the end he was there, and he is credited by most people for playing a vital role. Perhaps the army commander the former army commander might have a slightly different take on that, but that's a different story. And therefore, he is known to have acted decisively and incisively. When you consider that, and then you consider his very strong statement, he speaks perfect English, and he made it very clear. If you continue to harass us, using these baseless allegations, then we will not hesitate to remove ourselves from these organizations. But those are wonderful words for us here, but practically the risks for Sri Lanka are enormous.
Well, I think you must take it as a risk only if the other side to it is not going to also correct itself.
Right.
I think we are dealing with some things which are real and some things which are creations and imagined.
I've meant for a long time to ask this question. Let me ask the question now. What's so wrong in having a real investigation done by our government to see whether these allegations have any basis or not, and to make it public, at least even at this late stage? What is the reluctance on the part of Sri Lanka's government to do that?
If you go back, Sri Lanka since 2009 have on at least 2 occasions done that. The LLRC at that time, chaired by a former Attorney General, C.R. De Silva, did that. They brought up issues. Then that was followed by the Paranagama Commission.
Indeed.
So I don't think this line that we have not investigated is correct. At the same time, you see, you can't take,
so
when there are different bodies of evidence, some which are suppressed, like Lord Nasby's evidence, that is very clear evidence. And right through the last stages.
But for example, the International Red Cross report on the dead and so on, I think the figure's about 7,000. And it's almost beggars belief that report didn't gain enough traction. It was, if I remember rightly, we had a member of the European Parliament, Mr. Nerj Deva, who complained that that report wasn't even filed in the library there. And so we appear to have missed the boat, missed the narrative there, because that was very factual. They had ID numbers and they had actual data, as opposed to the 40,000 that Gordon Weiss puts out in his book.
And 140,000
and so on and so forth.
Do.
Those were all and claims of genocide and all sorts of nonsense, really, because they didn't have any evidence, whereas the Red Cross report had evidence. They had the ID numbers, it was all there.
I don't think the Red Cross was a report, because Red Cross confidentiality does not allow them to share that information.
Right.
I think that was a WikiLeaks report.
But if we use the rule of thumb that if there were, for every one dead in the theatre of war, you'd have 13 people who were treated in the theatre of war, injuries. So if you took 40,000, then you multiply that by 13, then we would have had 520,000 people.
I don't think either the LLRC or the Paranagama report dismisses the possibility and the fact that there has been some collateral damage.
Indeed.
But the point of the matter is that just because people think so, whether you must unleash on yourself a mass investigation which could have a debilitating effect on a society.
Right.
That is why the US, when accused in some countries, or the British government, Theresa May, Prime Minister Theresa May, when accused for allegations in Iraq, protect themselves by having internal investigations and not seeking to externalize it.
Yeah.
On the contrary, Sri Lanka preferred to externalize it, and by that I don't think it has really in any way helped the victims of it. It has just helped the political entrepreneurs
Yeah.
to use it and play it as a political
But even somebody is pointing out, but the UN, the so-called Ban Ki-moon report, it was never a UN report. It was a report.
Advisory.
It was advisory
Opinion.
to the office of the Secretary General.
Even worse, when in High Commissioner Navi Pillai's time,
Yeah.
when it was brought into Geneva, this was just before I went, it could not, they didn't even assign it a number.
Right.
So it's not, that report has no number.
Right.
It has no status, but it is the document which is peddled as evidence.
Now then, we want to move on a little bit. The Sri Lanka embassy in Abu Dhabi closed for 2 days after 5 of its staff members tested positive for COVID-19. What can you add to that statement?
Yes,
Foreign
a couple,
Secretary?
well, I mean, you know, these are the difficulties which my colleagues out in the field face. You know, I mean, right now I think we pay a lot of tribute to all the health workers, the security forces, the decision makers locally. I think we must also pause and pay tribute to the Sri Lankan missions,
Yeah.
who are not, the ones who are coming is one thing, but the ones who are staying is almost 1.5 million, and who are trying to address the needs of these people. And these 5 people were those who went to distribute food among the community. A couple of days ago, one person was detected with COVID. We isolated people who had come around with him, and now we have found 4 others from the SLBFE staff.
So will the office in Dubai, will they be able to handle what Abu Dhabi can't handle?
No, we don't have to do that, because the officers are working.
But they're
People are
working
working
from-
remotely.
Okay.
And in fact, we are going to have a flight from Dubai one of these days.
Yeah.
So work is not disrupted.
Yeah.
Only thing is that, and also the Middle East is going into holiday season for about a week from tomorrow. So there will be a lull in activity. But this morning when I heard about this, yesterday, we decided straight away that we were going to shut down.
Foreign
the
Secretary, thank you for that. Now, can you tell us, you say there's 40,000 plus wanting to come back. How closely do you work with the committee led by the Army Commander because obviously, do we have 40,000 quarantine beds?
No.
Right, and every one of them will need quarantining. when
Yes,
they
I
come
think,
back.
you see, I mean, I think for us, you and I are sitting here in a certain comfort and talking about this, but I must say that if we put ourselves in the place of those people out there,
Yeah.
each one of the 40,000, he thinks that they should be the chosen one to come first.
Yeah.
And I empathize with that,
Yeah.
but it's not practical. What we have been asked to do, and the Foreign Ministry's task, is to identify the places which are most vulnerable, identify the categories
Because
which
that
are
is the
most
most
vulnerable.
equitable way of doing it.
Sorry?
Because that is the most
That is the
equitable
most,
way.
and that is the only way. Now, for my colleagues out there, the only safeguard is my telling them, how do you do that? Go on the basis of who registered first.
Right.
Otherwise, how do you do? And I must tell you one thing, that none of the missions, nobody is interfering with the selection of who is coming.
Right.
And I take full responsibility for that.
Right.
What we are doing is we have a list which prioritizes people on the basis they ask to come. There is another list which has medical emergencies, and these are not, yes, there are some good tries for stomach aches and headaches,
Right.
but that's not what we are going
know.
for. We are going for much more urgent treatment.
But in all this, perhaps we can acknowledge that the government of Sri Lanka and the people here have not forgotten in the least the invaluable contribution made by our expatriate citizens, which is why the title today I chose was "Where Are Our Fellow Citizens?" They are out there, we empathize with them, we love them all, irrespective of what job they do.
Absolutely.
And all of us here are thinking about you, we feel for you, and we know how very much you want to come back. With the help of the Foreign Secretary and the other authorities, including the Army Commander who leads that committee, I'm sure that they will all, everything will end up well, hopefully.
We have to marry, once we find the people, then we have to marry that with what the availability of the facilities are, and the Presidential Secretariat and Task Force decide, because they are the ones who see that part of the puzzle, what we can bring. And now, for instance, right now, today's cabinet, the Foreign Ministry's plea was Mali, that, you know, the numbers are so large that we can't do this like once, you know, in a rotation, you know, once in 2 weeks, that we need to get in and get out a little more in a quick few sorties, and that is taken on board and will happen. But for that to happen, we must have quarantine facilities free. We have to also be conscious that domestically we must stay prepared as it happened once for any possible surge. Now the fact that some of the private facilities have opened up is also helpful.
When you mean by that you mean hotels?
The hotels,
so
yes,
on.
yes. But you must not make it, but my sense is that while it is helpful, you must not connect repatriation with those who can come to a hotel, because I think that will defeat the principle of maximum vulnerability, and that is what I think has been the bedrock of the policy of who comes out.
Foreign Secretary Ravinath Ariyasinghe, thank you very much for being on our program. We've run out of time, but thank you all the same, and wish you very well in your efforts to satisfy the needs of our fellow citizens overseas. And that's the way it was on Newsline. That's the way it was on Newsline. Take care. Have an excellent evening ahead of you. And of course, in all of this, we're all in it together. Good night and God bless.